I do see, and I've been reminded of this more from Opus lately, that there could be a slop apocalypse coming, and I love that term, and people are using it now. I think people are going to start running into a slop apocalypse. And it might not manifest in broken code. It might not manifest in the agent not being able to implement. But what it will manifest is more token spend and just more cycles and things will slow down. But I don't even think that's the top of the mountain. I really do believe human on the loop is the pinnacle of what to try to get to. Moving from a human in the loop to a human on the loop, but still maintaining that control. I personally build BMAD around the idea of you are in control. The agent is guiding you through it, using it as a partner.
It is my pleasure to bring to you this podcast style session with Brian, the founder of BMAD, one of the most popular and powerful coding agent frameworks on the planet. Myself and Rasmus, who's been on this channel before, we hosted Brian as a special guest in the Dynamis community. Now I'm bringing this recording to you. And let me tell you, this session was incredible. Brian had so many practical things to share, not just on BMAD and his vision for it, but where the engineering industry is heading with AI, best practices for using coding agents, and how to avoid the slop apocalypse, which is definitely coming down on us as we speak. And so I'll have chapters below to help you navigate through different parts of the conversation. Of course, I would encourage you to go through the entire thing. And let me know in the comments what you think of these sort of podcast style videos. Definitely thinking about doing more. Still trying to figure out the best format and everything. But yeah, this is a gold mine of content here. And so without further ado, over to the session.
So, welcome everyone to a special guest workshop. Rasmus and I here have Brian, the founder of BMAD, one of the most popular AI coding frameworks to ever live, and definitely one of them that I respect the most. There are a lot of frameworks out there for using AI coding assistance effectively that'll give you skills and strategy for going through every stage of the software development lifecycle. But the thought and care that Brian puts into BMAD is unmatched. And so we actually did a workshop with him a few weeks ago where he shared more of like the overall vision of BMAD, where it's heading, why he built it in the first place. And so many of you had awesome questions that we couldn't get to everything. And a lot of you wanted to have this dedicated session where we're just going to chat about BMAD. I got questions prepared. Rasmus has questions. I want you guys to share your questions as well, just as we go through things. And we're just going to have a conversation. I know we could fill 4 or 5 hours easily. So Brian, Rasmus, and I, we actually met beforehand to like really make sure we have good questions to guide the conversation in a way where it's interesting for everyone and we can really hit on all the important things. And so I'm just going to start by asking Brian some high-level questions about BMAD and his vision for it, maybe a recap for some of you who are already familiar with BMAD, and then we'll get into like talking about how BMAD relates to some of the other ideas in the industry right now, how Brian is actually helping larger companies adopt BMAD as well, which is super cool. I've gotten to hear all about it, but yeah, and then Rasmus has got some great questions prepped as well. So yeah, Brian, let's start things off. Just share a little bit about BMAD. Like what's the reason you built it in the first place and where is it heading? Because I know you got some really cool changes in the works right now.
Yeah, so well, thanks, guys. First of all, I love the Dynamos community, and it's an honor to be back here. And I see a lot of familiar faces from last time also. So I'll keep it short because I think a lot of people heard that last time. But, BMAD, I started it, God, it's over a year now. It's still hard to even believe. And I managed multiple teams in a company, and I was trying to just figure out how to get my own engineers using the agentic loop in tools like Cursor at the time, and experienced engineers. They would try it. It was a great, what they now call spicy autocomplete on some of the adoption curves, right? And it was great for that. But when trying the agent loop, my very good experienced engineers were like, this is trash. It's getting stuff wrong. I can do it quicker myself. I try it. I said, come on, guys, just try it because I'm seeing other people do amazing things. And at the end of the day, it wasn't there, but it was great and it was amazing for just doing the quick autocompletes, multi edits, asking questions. But that agent loop just wasn't taking off. And surprisingly, I was seeing this pretty much across the board. I'm pretty sure I mentioned this last time, but the dichotomy between what was online being said on YouTube at the time versus what I was seeing in reality was very different. I'm talking about the people who were saying, build your $1 million SaaS app overnight, no experience required. Meanwhile, experienced engineers, they're like, this is a toy. I can't even use this. Yada, 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 on and on. Won't repeat it all. But that's what led me to this obsession of kind of doing my own agentic loop at night over and over again, just seeing how far I could push the agent to get. And I would start to learn these techniques, right? If I just have some context here, if I have a context file with some rules in it, we actually all thought rules were the magic silver bullet a year and a half ago, right? There's just this obsession with my first two cringy YouTube videos are still on there, right? And they were about like rules and you just put these rules here and the agent is going to be magic. But we found out pretty quick, you stack up a bunch of rules, that doesn't really do it. But having snippets of files and giving the agent small pieces of intent at the time, we didn't have a lot of words for a lot of these things back then, right? So it was like I don't even think the term vibe coding was out yet, let alone context engineering or intents or small, like just all these things. But what I knew from my own background, coming from enterprise and working with companies for 25 plus years, is agile works because you're kind of breaking large ideas down into smaller pieces at the end of the day. And it just kind of hit me like, why not try to do the same thing? So, came up with the idea of like a product manager and talking through the high level idea and breaking it down to what I called user stories. And I still call them stories, not really user stories, but really they're specs, right? Again, spec engineering, and spec wasn't even a term yet. From the industry, specs were, something that we used for testing, like Gherkin, BDD, specs. But the same kind of term, I called them stories, but they were just small pieces of intent. And I was seeing, like, even with the primitive models of a year and a half ago, and the harnesses like Cursor with its very small context window, you could give it these small intents. You would have to put a lot of details in there, but it would do it well. And I was able to start getting this agent to build, at the time, a pretty complex application from beginning to end. And I would just get to a point where if it failed, I would see, well, what context do I really need in place? Maybe rules, maybe some documents or guidance. And then I would start over at the beginning and it would just get further and further. And just slowly over time, I would see like what it took to really get to the end. Honestly, this is not a bad technique, even now to use. Before using any framework, before using any skills, throw it all out and see what you can get the agent to do. Just try it out for yourself, right? I say this all the time, whatever skills, whatever frameworks you as an engineer, you can learn just by using your harness and model of choice. Exactly. And then CT, use your model of choice and learn what the model can do on its own, right? And see how far you can get it. And then start picking up skills or creating your own skills or starting to use the frameworks. But to answer your original question, that's where BMAD kind of evolved from. Originally, it was just to help individual developers learn how to use the agent loop effectively. Took it back to my company, didn't give the engineers the same thing. I wanted them to come to these conclusions on their own. And I strongly still suggest this when I consult with, anybody in an enterprise trying to get their own organizations to move further on this adoption curve. I think I talked about the 2-week sprint that I did last time. I'll say it again very briefly, and then I'll wrap up this question. But give your engineers the time to try to do this, or for you yourself, just take the time to do this. It's going to be frustrating at first. Maybe you're going to have to slow down, but try to pick up some piece of work that you want to do in a greenfield or in a brownfield, and just try to get the agent to get through it without having to do anything. Now it's much easier now than it was a year and a half ago. So you might just ask the agent, and it might just one shot it and do it or get it close. It might make a bunch of slop, but it's still worth doing this and just trying to get the quality and build the reps and learn how to really work with the model in the harness before, taking on these kind of bigger topics that we'll talk about today. But
yeah,
I think that's a good recap of like a lot of what I talked about last time. Obviously, BMAD has evolved since then, and it's become more modularized, more customizable. We have other ideas for like the creative innovation suite and just any kind of vertical or workflow where things can be worked sequentially, where you want to use the AI as a thinking partner. I will say one last thing. The big idea of BMAD for me was always not having the AI do the work for you. Now, it sounds like I was describing have the AI do the work for you, but that's at the coding piece. But
Mhm.
the planning, the crafting of what we now call specs, or the work that we're going to do, or the thinking or the ideation, I personally build BMAD around the idea of you are in control. The agent is guiding you through it, using it as a partner. If I get lazy, I feel lazy. Sometimes I'll be like, oh, just give me the answer. You just come up with the idea, but it feels dirty to me. I like to stay in control. I think we are the
Mhm.
creative force in all of this. We maintain our humanity and really treat the AI agent as an assistant or a facilitator. It's an amazing teacher. It's an amazing facilitator. And so that's really the idea also behind a lot of the skills and workflows in BMAD is really pushing you to be better, but then leveraging if there's like a gap in your own skill set, right? Where then you can leverage the model more. So I'll
Yeah,
pause there because I can probably just,
that's
I don't want to fill
that's
an
good.
hour and a half just going on and on.
All right, we each could definitely,
I
yeah.
know.
But I love that. Really, really well said. In fact, that's my philosophy as well. Like I always say, you want to delegate all of the coding to the coding agent, but still keep yourself in the driver's seat.
It's a
And
good way to
really,
put
there's
it.
two ways to do that, both together. It's you really want to be involved in the planning up front and the validation at the end. And BMAD has a lot of incredible things built in to help
Yeah.
you with, especially the planning at the start. So I love
Hmm.
that.
The sponsor of today's video is Manufact and their open source framework mcp-use. Most of us think that MCP servers just return back text or JSON, but that changed this year. MCP Apps is the first official extension to the protocol, and it allows MCP servers to return interfaces that can render directly in Claude or whatever client supports it. And mcp-use makes it extremely easy to build these MCP servers. One command and you have your server and a view. And so I built one myself. This is an MCP app that I have within Manufact here. If I go to tools, I created a simple tool for this MCP server to look up a GitHub repository, but not only does it return information as text or raw JSON, but we have this component that we can render directly in Claude like you're seeing here live in action. And just like it's one command to set everything up, it's also one command to deploy to Manufact. So I have this MCP server that I deployed in less than a minute. I now have this public URL that I can use to connect this MCP server in an application like Claude Desktop. So here's my connection to the MCP server. And once you deploy, you get cross-client testing, publishing checks for the ChatGPT plugin store and Claude connectors, and MCP native analytics. So you can trust that one push isn't going to break everything else. And so with this connection now in a conversation, I can, for example, just say, give me the stats for this GitHub repo, calls a tool, and then gives me back this beautifully rendered view. mcp-use is MIT with 10,500 stars on GitHub, and Manufact has a free tier. I'd highly recommend checking them out. I'll have a link to them in the description.
Yeah, one other thing that I want to jump right into is the really like how people can use BMAD. Because I know one thing that people a lot of times have a misconception with for BMAD is that you're very like shoehorned into a very particular process because
Yeah.
BMAD is opinionated. But I know, Brian, that was never really the intention for BMAD, and also you've been evolving it in ways recently to make it so that it's very plug and play, very adaptable, and just making it more lightweight in general. So if you could touch on that, like I'd love to hear your take on it all.
Yeah, when it first started, it really was just 6 skills. And I said even from the beginning, right? Like take this, learn these ideas, and come up with your own way of doing it. Now it's evolved though into a much larger thing. Every skill is customizable, so you can use BMAD customize first of all. You can say BMAD customize the PRD.
Hmm.
We use TOML files that live alongside the skills, and you can have it if you want to connect to Jira or Linear, or have it know about certain company governance that you need to include in certain reports, or if you wanted to use a certain framework, you can. It will basically save these customization files for you. You can do it for an organizational level or for an individual level. The nice thing with that is you're not modifying the actual skills and workflows. So you do that, you can continue to get updates. We keep the customization points consistent so they don't change version to version. So you're able to customize it that way. But beyond that, I think it's important to say you can use other skills with BMAD. I want you to come up with your own skills also and your own workflows to customize it. Originally, it was just 5 or 6 skills. It was start with the PRD, build the architecture. And the reason we had an architecture is because early on we found if you have a document that says like this is the coding tree, or we use these 6 tools, by having those things in place, it was there for a reason. It was there so the model wouldn't drift and randomly hit
Hmm.
a unit test failure and then decide to put a whole new database in while you're not paying attention. Or like I've seen these things happen, right? So all of these evolved out of the problems I went through going with those loops. So it was PRD, architecture. I'm trying to remember back to the early versions. There might have been a Scrum Master in there at one point, breaking down the tickets into stories. Again, these small intents, and then developing one by one. But what it's evolved to and what I saw is some people don't want to do a PRD. Or as the models have gotten more verbose, people get kind of grossed out by just the verbosity of some of these documents, which is a whole other topic we could talk about and how we're combating that.
Hmm.
Um, but not everybody thinks in a PRD or wants to. So one thing we introduced was what is now called BMAD build, but it was quick dev. It's gone through a few different names. But sometimes you're working in a large application. First of all, just talk to Claude. If you just need a quick thing done, there's this idea that you need to go through this whole flow. I use Claude directly. I use Copilot directly. I just talk to it and tell it what I need to do. If I have something a little bit more ambitious, but I don't want to go through this whole planning thing, I will just use what we were calling quick dev. But it is just a small loop that basically talks to you, comes up with your idea, makes a spec in the moment, and then goes into our build loop, all within one self-contained skill. Now it's called BMAD build. So BMAD build is very interesting how it's evolved because it is a front door to the building process of the BMAD method. I think we have a very good build loop that's also customizable, but you can just talk to it. You can talk to it about your idea, or you can give it an intent in any format. You could have a a story that you've written or a spec that you've written with any other skill set and kind of just feed it to BMAT build. It'll take it and build it. But I talked also about the PRD is not the only entry point. We have PRFAC, which comes from Amazon. Amazon process of PRFAC is basically you write the press release for your idea and you create a FAQ and you're defending it against the agent to actually prove this thing is even worth building. It's a very fun exercise. They've used this at Amazon forever. Bezos came up with this idea, and I think somebody else there, and they've used it for a lot of their big hit products. Um, Now, that's not for everybody, but the point is, if you want to figure out, is this thing even worth building? Use the agent to really go through some of these different processes. Sometimes you don't need a PRD. A lot of people I talk to, they just use a product brief. A product brief is a leaner document. It's still kind of describing the point and starting with that and then going to that through all of the process. You might just want to do some brainstorming, or again, you can use all of these other techniques, or just talk to Claude about your idea. You can even take skills from other frameworks, right? Like, the grill me skill is very popular. There's other stuff out there. You can use those, harden your idea, whatever it is, and then feed it into BMAT. So BMAT is customizable. It's wide open. You can kind of mix and match, but the idea is the process. I'll stop there and maybe we'll get some more of what's coming in V7 because I saw some questions around that, and I'll say a little bit what's kind of hardening with it, but we can talk about
Yeah,
how that also continues to make it customizable.
that sounds great. Yeah, I'd love to get into that, and then I know Rasmus has some questions after.
For
I think
sure.
that that'll be a good flow here. But yeah, I love how customizable BMAT is because most AI coding frameworks aren't that way. And I think that's why there's definitely like a very large camp that's growing larger and larger where it's, screw the frameworks, like here's a collection of skills that you should take for yourself, or you should just
Yeah.
totally start from the ground up. And I think there's value to that. In fact, I teach that in a lot of ways because I agree to an extent with that camp where like most of these frameworks are too bloated.
Hmm.
And like to be honest, I thought that of BMAT at one point as well. But
Yep.
hearing your philosophy and then the work that you've done on it over the last few months is just huge. Like it's so cool how powerful BMAD is, but then like adaptable at the same time. That's really the important balance is making something where you can sort of like teach as you give the framework to people, but then
Hmm.
also you're able to mold it to your own workflows as you need. And then I definitely know like you're sharing with me earlier, Brian, a lot of larger companies where they actually just want the standard given to them. And so they're going to BMAD for that, which is a whole other thing that we could talk about. But yeah, I definitely
Yep.
want to now get into what you're sharing with how BMAD is evolving with V7 and beyond. So yeah, please go ahead and take the floor again. Just talk about like what you're doing with
Sure.
the
Sure.
evolution here.
Yeah, well, thanks for saying that, Cole. First, I want to say, like, sincerely, thank you, for giving BMAD a chance again and really checking it out because, it's an easy target, right? BMAD, I don't know if it was the first, but when we started it, there were no skills. There were no, like, really good ways to think about some of these things. So we've
Mhm.
evolved through a lot where other people have been able to come in, right at the right time and build something at that point in time. I will say, even a lot of the skill collections, they are very opinionated and do lock you into their, so they might say that they're not a framework, but some of them feel very framework-ish to me also and kind of push
Mhm.
you through things. And you know what, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, let's be honest, having a system and thinking in systems I think is a good thing. I think there's two different philosophies around skills. When skills were released, they had one idea about skills, is that they are this small atomic unit that can kind of augment the model and do one thing. But the way they built skills and the genius of the way they built skills, intentionally or unintentionally, I don't think they put a lot of thought into this. But there's the whole idea of progressive disclosure. I want to say progressive
Yep.
exposure. That's a whole other topic that we shouldn't get into today.
Mhm.
But and then they also made skills have a maximum body size of something ridiculous, like 25 meg or something. Like, you can put a lot into skills. Now, obviously, your skill.md file, you want it to be small and lean because that's always, loaded. But you can have different philosophies with how you create your skills. I used to split up skills into a create skill, in an edit skill, and a validate skill, and there's just a lot of repetition and bloat. That's an embarrassing older version of BMAD that we've moved away from. But now, like, by putting all of those ideas into the same skill and trusting the model to do things more, you can have less skills, but have different flows through them where it can do just a lot more stuff. And again, still making them customizable. Um, but again, like, I think every skill package has some kind of flow that it's going to ask you to do. And that's a good thing. Skills don't have to be these atomic, tiny things. By having them as part of an ecosystem, they have some commonalities. They start to work well together. So I still believe that it's a good idea. But what I don't want to do is lock you into one way of doing things. And the reason is because even for me, one way of doing things doesn't work. I work on many different types of projects, and what I do at work, even within work, right? Sometimes I'm working on a UI front end. Sometimes I'm working on enterprise architecture or in my hobby projects, right? Like, working on BMAD and working on skill collections is very different than working on some of the side projects that I work on. So I wouldn't
Mhm.
want to be
Right.
locked into one way of working. And that's why I've worked so hard to make it adaptable. Sometimes it's slow, because it's evolving and we got to make it continue to work with the way people are still working at it. But yeah, it's meant to be evolvable. So, Cole, I think you had another question in there, and I went a little bit off topic. You were asking about
No, you're good.
V7, I think.
Yeah, V7. Yep.
Yeah, so I haven't released anything official about this yet, but we're about 2 or 3 weeks away. One of the biggest
Okay.
things that we've really wanted to do, and we've really been focused on the last few months, is also we want to support enterprise and teams. And almost all of the questions we get now are about, how do I use this on our team effectively? Right now, with BMAD still, when you define the breakdown of your project, it splits it up into epics and stories, or just stories if you like. But it's basically in one file right now, and you do it against a project. What we're working on now is making it so it will split up epics basically into multiple folders, and all the stories are separate files. You'll also be able to connect it to a Jira or a Linear if you want to, or some other system of record. We want to make it very open. But the idea is, by actually creating separate files, you can now have different teams or different people work on different things. And that's the way real enterprise works. I've been piloting this in companies with real world teams, and this is working really well. This is one of the biggest unlocks to really get it to, yeah, to make it more of a collaboration platform. Speaking of collaboration platform, we really want to support the idea also of keeping track of all the artifacts that you're doing with planning, but in an enterprise environment, which I assume many of the people here also watching are, from team environments or working in
Hmm.
teams. You want to be able to collaborate with different people at different levels. So real world product managers still have a place in all of this, right? Developers, designers. By having everything in a centralized location, some people are good at Git, some people are not going to understand Git. So we're looking at ways to tie these things together, allow them to be collaborative. So people, one person can work on the PRD, one person can work on an architecture. We want to support solution designs when there's small pieces that really need to be fleshed out and figured out. And then by taking all of these things together, having them in a somewhat common place where they're discoverable, um, it just makes it easier then as we do the ticketing and the creation of the specs where it can find the right things. So that's a lot of what's coming with V7. Also, one other big thing is we've been kind of missing the boat up to this point on the skill marketplaces. Again, we started with a heavy installer because there were no skills. There was no common place to
Hmm.
put your files. Very soon, actually, maybe even before the V7 release, we're doing some testing this week. We will be putting skill collections into Vercel's NPX skills, Claude Marketplace, Codex Marketplace. We're starting with those. Um, but it will
Nice.
continue to be open to all of this. And we're also going to split it up into smaller pieces. So maybe you want more creative stuff or you're a product manager and you just want to work on like ideation, right? You'll be able to download those skills. Or maybe you just want our developer tools or the BMAD loop or whatever, right? Whatever that is, you'll be able to pick and choose what you want. Maybe you don't need the whole thing. Um,
Yeah, very cool. Yeah,
yeah,
actually, Sean had a question on this. I think that's what you're looking at,
I
Brian.
just
I
saw
have
that.
my
So
own.
yeah, let me read his
Yeah,
question.
I can read it to you as well. I think
Yeah,
I'd love to do questions that way. But he asked if I have my own ticketing tracking system, could or would BMAT allow me to leverage it? Like assuming it
exactly.
has an MCP or CLI.
No, 100%. That's what we want to do. So getting a lot of the specifics out of it in BMAD code, or excuse me, in the BMAD method or any of them,
Hmm.
and creating connectors. We're going to be releasing connectors. But even those, we want to make it so they are also very customizable for your needs because there's no one way to use Jira or Linear, these types of things too. But yep,
Right.
100%.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love how much you're thinking about team use because I feel like just people creating AI coding frameworks in general aren't thinking about it enough. And so even if you don't use BMAD, which I think it's worth using, but even if you don't use BMAD, just looking at it as an example, as V7 comes out and beyond, like as a way to integrate coding agents at a team level is a really powerful thing. And
Hell yeah.
so, and to Brian's point, like it's not like you have to get totally ingrained in this opinionated approach. Like BMAT is there to be a reference, a teaching tool. You take parts of it, you take the whole thing, whatever you want. A lot of companies are taking the whole thing, and that's super cool because you guys are thinking about things that they need, the companies need, and a lot of you might be on companies that need it, and maybe you're already integrating BMAT within your organization. So, all
There's
right.
um there's an inflection point, I think, or maybe that's not the right word of it, but I saw this in my own company. I've seen this in others.
Mhm.
In Cole, I think we even talked about this a little bit, and you've talked about this in some of your training. It's very easy to focus on the engineers first. And I think
Right.
that's the right thing to do, right? Because they're the early adopters. They're going to understand the technology. They understand Git. You can speed them up only so much. I took my team, like I said, I went through this process and very quickly, 100% using agent mode, speeding
Right.
up. And you're going to hit another wall very quickly. Two walls, one to the right of that inflection point and one to the left.
Mhm.
The right is you're going to start running into my developers are going so quick. Now the bottleneck is code reviews.
Mhm.
And then another thing that AI highlights in organizations and also with people is it is an amplifier, but it's not always an amplifier of good. If you have bad CI/CD or bad processes, right? Or you're maybe not, I mean, obviously nobody here, right? But maybe you're not a good engineer or something. It actually will amplify those. It's a very interesting phenomenon. I've seen this, right? So it will
Mhm.
start to highlight, oh, we need to improve our CI/CD. We want to go faster. We need to get our pipelines able to go all the way to production and start putting gates in there.
Mhm.
Oh, our code reviews are a bottleneck. Do we introduce new tools like CodeRabbit or other things? Do we change our position around do we need two-person review on everything? Maybe we only need one-person review.
Hmm.
Maybe some things we let go through the pipeline, and maybe we build tools or analysis that can look at the code or what was done and say, this is a trivial change. We're changing some CSS, let it go all the way to production. And maybe we carve out, 20 to 30% going to the engineer, and then using our best people to actually be reviewing the things that really need thought or
Hmm.
care, or team collaboration. That is to the right of the inflection point. To the left is the whole other place where I think just people do not focus in a team or an enterprise environment, which is where I think BMAD is unique. Maybe not 100% unique, but I really believe the interesting part of BMAD is everything to the left of having it build the code. I love our BMAD build. I love our BMAD loop, the dark factory, taking the specs. But my personal interest with BMAD is helping people come up with the best specs that they can. As we elevate engineers on our team and product managers, at the end of the day, the job is understanding the business, understanding the product or what you want to build, making sure it's the right thing, finding interesting opportunities, and then crafting that spec because it is that spec that goes into the machine. And eventually the machine is going to be automated. It's going to get more and more automated. It's going to homogenize across a company and things are to be going in there. And so back to the idea of, whether or not you want to be on a framework. If you're in a company, you're going to be in a framework.
Hmm.
You can have 50, 100,000 engineers all coming up with their dark factories, all coming up with their own ways of, breaking down to an implementation plan. But at some point, you're going to say, why? If we have a good quality, consistent spec and the engineers are all basically doing the same thing anyways, it very soon is going to be to the point where you're doing something in Jira, you're going to drag that Jira ticket to some process, agent's going to pick it up, start doing it, and you're going to be reviewing a code review. So if you're an engineer, I really believe this. You are so valuable, but your mindset of what your value is has to change. And
Right.
it's really going to up level you. Like I saw this with my own team. A lot of people were, concerned about it 6 months ago. Like, when they started seeing the agent doing all their stuff and they start thinking, well, what is my worth now? Because, I was a ticket jockey before. I would pull it down and I was good at completing that ticket and getting it done. But the shift that's happened, even with my own teams, has been amazing. Like they're loving it now because they're realizing now they can start to focus on the higher level. And it's not only the architect's job or it's not only the product manager's job, but they are able to focus on the bigger picture and understand the product and really understand what we're building and why it makes sense. So, focusing on the left of that inflection point is the sweet spot of BMAD, right? Like how to help teams work together and collaborate and move things using AI. So, start with the engineers, but you're going to hit a bottleneck. So, then you start looking at product management and how can we actually start getting good ideas to the team quicker? How can we move faster in that regard? Because that becomes the big bottleneck where then all of a sudden devs are going through stuff so quick. Now all of a sudden you're waiting on the business to catch up. So really focusing on the whole left of getting the stuff to the engineer. And if you're a solo dev, it's the same thing, right? Or if you're a hobbyist even, or a solopreneur or whatever, you now have the ability to use AI so much more than just a coding agent. Use it to
Hmm.
ideate, use it to do market research, test, prototype, A/B test, just so much, man. So much power to the left of. So that's where I'm really passionate and love
Hmm.
that AI can do so much of that. And that's why I'm really big into the whole facilitation thing, right? Go in with your strong ideas, be the expert, give it your opinions, let it harden your ideas or research more and put into it. So let me pause there because I see a lot of questions popping up and
Yeah.
I think there's also a lot more to be said around that, and I think you are on the right track there with everything. Like everything you're describing there on the left as well is actually now the engineer's job as well. Like they need to engineer that product, if you will, that needs to exist for
yes.
the business to be able to get there. So the work of an engineer isn't only to ship the code; it becomes to build that system that allows the company to ship the code as well and to engineer their companies build loop, if you will, that you have in BMAT, for example.
Hmm.
They can build their own companies build loop, their own companies
Exactly. Yes.
PRD generator, whatever you want to call it. Because I also see a big risk, and I want your take on that too. When you also give over these tasks to a non-engineer, like writing PRDs or writing specs, especially. if that is being written by someone who doesn't really understand the code or understand the system, it's a big risk also that those things have too much opinionated, like say, engineering decisions in them before they hit the engineer. So then
Yeah.
it's really the engineer's job to make sure that before it hits the coding agent, it needs to be up to par, because otherwise, like garbage in, garbage out, right, in that system too. So
Hmm.
you as the engineer have to decide like where does your product manager's work need to stop for you to be able to pick that up and to put it into the rest of the build loop, if you will.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. I think in the future, and we're starting to do this now, as we hire for engineering and product, the roles really are evolving, and we are now trying to hire what we're now commonly calling like systems thinkers. Whether you're a product manager or an engineer, we're hiring systems thinkers. And for the engineers that we already have, like it's painful for some, and some are natural to it, but it's an evolution that everybody's going to. But I 100% agree with you that there is a need for product people and designers and engineers. Just because the AI allows us to do all these things and working on our own things, it's great to help us with those things. But I see it. I still see value in all those different roles. It's just the roles are changing and evolving. Lenny's podcast recently, shout out to Lenny. Love to be on your show sometime. But he had the CPO of Whatnot, I think, recently on, Chief Product Officer, talking about kind of a clickbaity title that he's not going to hire product managers anymore. But what he really meant is less product managers doing what product managers really should be doing, which is thinking at a higher level
Mhm.
about direction. One thing we could talk about is the shift in how teams should probably be formed in the future. Generally an agile team in a lot of companies could be anywhere from like 5 to 8 people. And then you have a scrum master, and a lot of times you have a product manager, even assigned to that team. And then you would have an epic, and an epic might be worked on for a month, and multiple people are working on different pieces of that. With AI now, everything is so compressed. We can plan more ahead of time. But also, I think I said this last time, but I consider the epic as the new unit of work for engineers. Not every company uses the term epic in stories, but basically what I'm saying is a larger block of work is now the unit of work for an individual engineer. We've
Mhm.
thrown out the idea of 2 week sprints. I don't recommend doing that anymore. I treat the epic now as its own mini agile initiative. Somebody owns it, maybe 2 people are working together on it, and they work it from beginning to end. So what we're starting to see is this idea of breaking down larger scrum teams into smaller pods of 2 to 4 engineers. And so, as you back to the Lenny point, the idea of removing product managers is you don't have necessarily product managers tied to each of those teams. Instead, you're building small pods, and somebody, at least one person on the team, maybe an engineer, maybe somebody from a product background, they're all technical, but that person can really think about and understand and know what they own, what they're responsible for
Mm.
it, and they are the best ones to actually think of new ideas to do with it and keep it moving forward. And then you have like a good kind of lead on there. And there's still a place for junior engineers in this pod model. And shout out to the companies that are doing good here, still supporting engineers coming out of school, because it's a rough time to be getting a degree right now and trying to get into this industry.
Yeah.
I won't say the companies that are doing it or not doing it, but the ones that I see doing it that are going to this pod model and they are supporting junior engineers, it is working. You can find good engineers that have this system mindset right out of school and build them up, and they can become effective very quickly. It's just training engineers in a different way than we did before. But these smaller pods, they're working good. They're owning an epic. They're driving it beginning to end. And so yes, you still have the product managers, and they're still so valuable. But I think again, the roles are just shifting. They're a little bit more hands-on if they're going to be in the pod, or if they're going to be higher level. The engineers are really kind of some of the engineers or somebody is picking up the slack in that pod to really be that
Right.
systems thinker and that product thinker. So it's a very
Yeah.
interesting
Yeah.
shift that we're seeing.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. And I
That's
think that the key to those pods and that model as well is that you assign ownership to a pod of a problem, and that little pod can own that problem, whether you call that
mhm.
problem an epic or a story or whatever shape you want to put it in. What they really do is they own the problem and the solution to that problem end to end.
Exactly. Yes,
Yeah.
Right.
yes. Yes, is the shift in ownership and really the shift in responsibility to the engineers to like really care and understand what they're building on instead of just being ticket jockeys, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. We have a lot of questions in the chat right now. Rasmus, maybe you could pick one to ask, and then I'll address something more higher level from Sander right now, because Sander asked a really good question. Because, yeah, Brian, I'm not sure if you're aware, but there's a course in the community, the Agentic Coding course, where I teach a lot of like the philosophy that you share with BMAD, really like the full AI software development lifecycle, if you want to call it that. And so, Sandra asked, what's the connection between RPIV and BMAD? RPIV is just like one of the core acronyms for the process in the course. And really, Sandra, they're both an approach to do the same thing. Like RPIV is short for Research Plan, Implement, Validate. It's the core development loop. And then, of course, there's a lot I teach in the course on either end, like a lot on the left side, like we're talking about here, around with epics and specs and tickets and everything. BMAD is just another approach for really doing the same thing. And it's a very similar approach. Like that's why Brian's here. One of the big reasons Brian is here in the first place is we share a lot of the same ideas and philosophy around how we bring AI into the SDLC.
Yeah,
And
I
so,
love that acronym. That's great, but
yeah,
100%, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, Sandra, it's not like they are necessarily like used together. You would definitely like take ideas from both as you're building out your own system and really molding it to how you like to work, I think is the ideal scenario there. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it's very much the same.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm just looking at your acronym. So research plan, implement. Yeah, 100% the same. So I think we call it an analysis,
Hmm.
and analysis includes research. It also includes like that PR fac idea or just any kind of like, should we be building this and are we building the right thing? I worked at NASA for a while. I worked for the independent validation and verification, right? And IV&V. V&V is about, are we building the right thing and did we build it right? And I
Hmm.
think all of these plans, especially being accelerated now, that's important to have in your flow. So, the research and the planning up front, it needs to include like, should we even be building this thing? Now, you might have
Exactly.
done that
Yeah.
before the RP or IV, right? But you're doing that
Yeah.
one way or the other. You come up with an idea. It's a very good idea to not just research how to do it, but should we do this?
Yep.
Is there market fit? Like yes, it's fast to prototype and build things, but still, it's costing time and money when you could be doing
Yeah.
something else. So we have a lot of that in BMAD. The analysis is optional, though. Again, all of these phases are optional, but the key, you know, uh, the plan, the implementation, and the validation, like that's really the key right there, and 100% in BMAD also. So different names, and I've seen other frameworks with different acronyms, but they all kind of come down to the same thing, like understand what
Hmm.
you want to do, plan it, implement it, and validation. And validation is like a whole other topic that
Oh
we
yeah.
could go into.
Everything
So
to the right of
That's
very
implementation, right?
cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
that's its
Yeah.
own engineering problem in and of itself. And I think
Hmm.
you described it a little bit like build your CI, build your testing infrastructure, and so on.
Yeah.
So you can catch things on that side. But I also think here we have a question from Sean here. How does BMAD manage self-improvement? My go-to workflow, the RPIV, has a system review mechanism that will update things like skills, Claude.md, agents.md, etc. So how do you think about self-improvement or system improvement or outer loop improvement, if you will, or
Yeah,
inner loop
that's
improvement?
something that we're really starting to get into now and evolving our own skills. So we don't have skills that are self-updating skills themselves. But that is definitely a topic that we're looking into. Our BMAD build is interesting in that it has some loops in it. So in the BMAD build, we talked about that before. It will talk to you, it will take your plan, or it will just take it in. It does the build. And oh, this is a whole other interesting topic, but how you actually write your specs is very important and can lead to big savings. What documentation you have in your repo makes a difference, and it's probably not what you think is good because even what we preached in the past is 100% wrong, just based on the way the models and the harnesses have evolved. But when you have good acceptance criteria in your spec, in BMAD build, it will actually loop. It will try to build it. We have different lenses that fire against it, and it will, auto complete or auto loop, and then give you a much better result. So having different review lenses kind of like will help your build. Um, the self improvement loops, though, Sean, I think it's a great idea, right? As far as how to build and improve skills or memory systems. There's so many techniques. These are all techniques in your toolbox that you want to be aware of and use. Um, Rasmus or Cole, what are you guys doing, with your skills? Where do
Uh,
you see kind of that taking
yeah,
shape?
so I have some opinions here. We have some opinions in our course, of course, as well, and that's where our pivot is coming from as well. And we
Hmm.
don't have any. Sorry, can you hear me?
Hmm.
Yep, yeah, you're good.
Okay, I got a phone call, so I can't hear you at the moment, but I saw you
Oh.
shake or nodding your head, so I will start hearing you in a second. But yeah, so yeah, our PIV and our course, we have this like we have two ways of doing system improvement. One is like opportunistic of your entire system, and we'll kind of scan your entire system for flaws and how you use your harness. It will scan your logs and whatnot. So it
Hmm.
basically suggests improvements that you could look into. And then we have the inner loop improvement that will check an individual build loop or an individual piv loop, if you will, and that will check, your plan, your skills, your implement and build skills against that session's logs.
Got it.
And again, neither of these are auto updating. Both of them are suggesting updates that you could look into. So
Right. You drive
still
it. Yeah.
I do not believe in auto updating skills because I mean we could talk about Opus here for a few hours, I think, as well, because if you run that loop in Opus,
100%. Yeah.
you will have a
Just
very
ads and
bloated skill
ads.
after
Yeah.
a couple of rounds.
Hmm.
So it's not a good idea to have
Have you
this.
tried Hermes, or have you used Hermes? Hermes, I haven't used it a lot, but I've been hearing about how it has self-evolving skills. I'd be
Yeah,
curious.
uh, I have used Hermes to some extent. I do not use any of the self-improvement things. I don't believe in it. I mean, it works uh, kind of okay for the first couple of rounds, right? But then it kind of gets rotted, after a while because it just it adds, these deterministic blocks to things that you don't want
Yeah.
to be
Yes, 100%.
deterministic, and yeah, and it could do all of these things that you are kind of opinionated about, and then it adds something completely different than what you actually
Right.
wanted there. So I'm very particular about my skills. I have my own, let's say BMAD version, like called PRP, where I have my
Yeah.
own
And I think
framework.
everybody should. Hmm.
Yeah,
Skills.
and
Wow, you brought up a lot of things there. Opus, right? Opus has done a number on a lot of things. We could talk about that.
Yep.
Skill building in general, even Fable, I will say, like Fable, and I bet Mythos also. They don't have good training data on what a good skill is. 100% full slop and full slop, full stop.
Nice.
But you know what? Full slop is actually probably a better word for it. The training data that the new models are getting trained on, they know what skills are now, and they still produce slop skills. Now, this
Hmm.
doesn't mean that you can't have it make a wonderful skill for you. You can have it go through your session logs and build a skill for you, and it's going to work. But it is not an optimal skill. It is not a well-written skill, and it's going to be bloated and overdone. I built the BMAD builder, and it has a lot of validations to help you write skills. And it also has, I think I took it out, but in there, I also had a self-improvement loop where it was using evals to start with a very lean skill. And then the evals would run. And if one of the eval fails, this is eval driven development for skills. I still believe in the technique. I just still think it's not fully there yet to be 100% effective. But it would slowly layer in new things into your skill until it's meeting the needs. It doesn't work that great. The best thing I have found for creating skills is two approaches. One is to start with the model, talk to it, use something like the BMAD builder, something that really questions you, gets it out of you, understands what your definition of a quality skill is, right? Like, what do you want? X number of lines, don't be verbose, use progressive disclosure. There's so many opinions, right? We talked about like what even is a skill is so different to people, but have it do that. Take your time to go through it, manually edit it. The other approach is just handcraft your skills. And I know that sounds archaic and barbaric, but actually I would take this approach. First of all, just talk to the model. Does the model do it? Do you even need the skill? If you don't, it's great. If you find that you have to keep telling it some of those things, just start with a markdown file and just write down those few things. Because I say all this to say exactly what you said with Opus and also with Fable is I thought they were going to be these amazing models and finally be able to write my skills for me well. And I hate the way they write skills. But again, the skills might work. I'm obsessed over the quality of the skills and the leanness, especially because I know a lot of people
Hmm.
are going to be using the skills. And so I think about like token waste and it, you know, et cetera,
Right.
et
And people
cetera.
care people care more about token efficiency more and more,
Yeah, but there's
because
some
it's yeah.
very, very popular skills out there. And I love them. I use them. Like the 30-day skill. I've been loving that one.
Hmm.
Probably shouldn't endorse it because I think it's doing some, terms of service violations against Reddit and some other places. But it's a great skill if you want to do research of what's been going on in the last 30 days. It somehow will scrape from Twitter and Reddit. So shout out to that guy. But if
Wow.
you look at the skill, it's a bloated mess of crap in the skill. Like it's like there's stuff in there that is just wasting the model's attention, and it's
Hmm.
amazing that it works as well as it does. So sometimes I wonder, am I even overthinking the quality of skills because it can still get the job done? But
Yeah.
if you're going to use skills for agents that are running them in production, or company in your enterprise relies on these skills, then take the time to craft them well and
Yes.
do that. But
Hmm.
I agree. I mean, I write skills on a daily basis and I edit my skills on a daily basis as well. And
yeah,
I have done it for over 2 years. They haven't been called skills all the time, but I've been editing my markdown files for 2 years.
Yeah.
and they are
And
kind of just prompts, right? Yeah, like, or I don't
I
know. Do
mean,
you consider
everything is
like
just a
I got
markdown
into an
file.
argument the other day
Yeah.
saying they are prompts or aren't prompts. What do you guys think? Are they
They
prompts?
are. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think they're.
I have always said
Thank you.
like skills, commands, rule files, system prompt, everything is just another markdown file. Like it's just another way of loading a
It's all
markdown file
prompts
into
into the machine,
context.
right?
Yeah,
Which is why
exactly.
I laugh
And
when people say like prompt engineering is dead or not. It's like,
yeah,
what? This is like the core primitive of everything, whether it's loops
I
or
agree.
harnesses or graphs. At the end of the day,
Yeah.
the primitive is the prompt. What else do we have to put into the machine? So,
Yeah. I mean, if
Yeah.
you want to get
So one thing
really,
I
really
wanted to say
picky,
around,
what's that called?
yeah, I was just gonna end by saying if you want to get really, really picky, the one primitive that isn't just the prompt is a hook, because that's like the one thing that's like adding determinism into your AI coding
Right.
workflow. But literally everything else, like subagents and rules and skills, it's all just prompts. It's all just markdown.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's markdown that you can accompany with something else because I mean you can easily embed this little CLI or a script or something
Hmm.
inside of a skill, and you can just teach your agent how to use that script, for example. But I mean it's just an instruction for how to do something.
Yeah.
But
Right.
yeah, so one thing I would want to say just to close out the self-improvement thing and the way I do it, because I will run my loops. I have my two projects open where I have all my skills and I have the project that I'm working on. And as I realize, okay, it made a mistake here now, or it did this here now, I will log that as issues and evidence into my
Yeah.
skills repo. And then I will figure out why did it do this, and I will just
Hmm.
improve on my skills repo. And I very rarely go in and edit the code manually on my real project. I will just throw it away and run the loop again on
Hmm.
the same issue with the new skill and see
Yeah.
if it
That's a
works.
great technique. Yeah. Everybody should probably learn to use that technique and follow something similar to that.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
good stuff. Cool. Well, yeah, we've got another good question from Sander here that I'd love your take on, Brian. If you would recommend to learn one skill to builders with AI, what would it be? Is it system thinking or being able to abstract ideas? Or just what's your take in general?
Oof, that is an interesting question.
Yeah, big
Um,
one.
Systems thinking versus what was the other one, Cole?
Being able to abstract ideas, which he might be actually connecting them. Like, he's asking, like, is that the most important thing, or is
Yeah,
it something else?
they're really related. I do think I don't know. I think systems thinking can be developed, right? I think people can get better at it. It's an abstract concept, but I don't want to say it's something people either have or they don't have, but I will say that that is a differentiator I see among working engineers. Um, both God, this is painting with such a broad brush, right? But some
Yeah.
people you can tell are just systems thinkers and they can kind of abstract and think how to work in systems at the end of the day. I do think it's a very important skill to develop, because if you're doing this for a career, thinking in systems, goes so much more beyond just like how to get the agent to do what you want or how to develop skills or how to develop the software, but looking at how the business entities, work and piece together and connections and like just systems thinking in general, I think
Hmm.
is just such a great. skill, and it really does involve abstraction. So I'm not totally getting the dichotomy, but I do think it's something that can be developed,
Yeah.
um, and worked
Yeah.
on.
That's good. And I think Sanders actually connecting them together. I don't think he's saying there's a
Okay.
dichotomy. Pretty sure, yeah. But yeah, just to add on to that, one thing I've seen is the developers that are struggling the most with adopting AI and just them being at most risk of losing their job, for example, they're the ones that are very prone to getting like lost in the weeds. Excuse me, getting lost in the weeds. Like
Bless
they're
you.
so obsessed with learning syntax and programming languages and the things that
Yeah.
like AI is handling a lot now. There are people that used to be important, and they still are to an extent, but they used to be really important because they're the one that the team would go to when it's like, hey, I need you to help me like write up this script really quick. Or like they're the ones that are kind of like the ticket jockeys, like you were saying, Brian, where they're able to
Hmm.
just like take a ticket and just like blow through it because they can write all the code and they're not going over to Stack Overflow or anything. They're able to just get things done. They follow instructions really well, know how to
Yep.
execute. But they're actually the ones that are struggling the most right now because more of the free thinkers, people that can think higher level, which is systems thinking, they're the ones that are able to drive agents more. And they're just less prone to wanting to fight the agent and do more themselves than they should. And so I think for those people, like if that's you, and this used to be me, I'm going to be honest, like I used to be that person that like
Hmm.
was very proud of like how much I had, TypeScript and Python syntax
That was our
memorized.
identity, right? Yeah,
Yeah, right.
I
Yeah.
mean,
And
we
it's
both came from
like,
this career. Yeah.
right. Yeah. So I had to ditch that and be like, I don't care about how much I know different programming languages or how easy it is for me to implement like object-oriented programming or singleton patterns, like any of these things that like agents can just knock out of the park. Maybe it's important for you to identify when you'd want to use that type of design pattern, but then you don't implement it anymore. And so I've had
100%.
to
Yeah.
like make myself focus more and more on the higher level thinking. And obviously that's paid dividends.
I think I mostly agree with you. I do feel, I don't know. This is tough, right? Somebody just coming into the industry right now. Um, I don't know what's being taught in universities. I'm actually scared because I heard somebody told me they were teaching BMAD in a course, and I'm like, okay, that's
Whoa.
bizarre. But I hope they're teaching more than. Well, then they made me sad because they told me it was like vibe coding one-on-one or one-on-one. I'm like, no, this is not vibe coding. So
Oh, no.
university's not getting what's going on. What a surprise, right? But I hope universities are still teaching design patterns. I mean, that really kind of gets into systems thinking right there. I think
Yeah.
the common term right now that I really like is taste, right? And that does still relate to spotting good or bad code or code smells or patterns. I grew up listening to, or grew up through my career listening to like Bob Martin, Uncle Bob.
Mm.
Many people probably know him, and he always used the term software craftsmanship, and I think that's still relevant in a way, but
Mhm.
it's not the same as what it was before. Um,
Sure.
I think it's still important to understand clean code and dry principles and caring about
Yeah.
that stuff, but not necessarily like you're saying, obsessing over all the details. But I do see, and I've been reminded of this more from Opus lately, that there could be a sloppocalypse coming, and I love that term, and people are using it now.
Hmm.
So I'll give one key example. I have always been very opposed to code comments. I love self-documenting code,
Yeah.
meaning very good variable names. Maybe you put a function header on it, but I've worked at places where the standard was. This is an older thing, but a lot of Java shops back in the day, they would have engineers write a function comment with almost every line of code, and it drove me crazy, right? And I'm glad like the whole clean code and everything else started getting really popularized recently with Opus 5 and its propensity to talk nonsense.
Hmm.
Has been shoving code comments into all the
Yeah.
code,
Yep.
and a lot
Yep.
of people just didn't notice it because the code rabbits and the code review things were not picking it up.
Hmm.
And so just knowing about these things is important, and knowing like why code comments can be a bad thing is actually important. When you start documenting the code, and the code changes and the comments aren't updated, which
Yep.
the LLM will also do, trust me. It then starts causing attention deficiencies in the model where it's now
Right.
fighting documentation or code comments and which is the source of truth. And this is where I say it's still important to sometimes just look at the code. One of the things I want to introduce into BMAT actually is when you get to the end of the epic, I want to have a good refactoring skill that kind of refactors after all of it's done. It can be done after you got all this stuff in production and it's working
Yeah.
well, but I'm seeing this across the industry. People are not going back and doing the refactor
Right.
of the work that's going in. And this is where I think people are going to start running into a slot apocalypse. And it might
Yeah.
not manifest in broken code. It might not manifest in the agent not being able to implement. But what it will manifest is more token spend and just more cycles, and things will slow down.
That's good. Yeah.
So all to say, Cole, I 100% agree with you. And like again, systems thinking, but also having and developing taste. And if you're a product manager, if you haven't, been a developer, you can learn these taste skills. And I see people doing it. So I would say like try to understand. Like don't just tell the agent follow clean code. First of all, you don't need to tell the agents that anymore. It doesn't really do anything like we believed it would a year ago. But I think it's worth have a discussion with Claude and say, Claude, what are clean code concepts? What are things that I should be interested in? Start to learn some of these things and look out for them yourself, or start to tune your code review agents to really look for these types of things. Because it's scary, the type of things they aren't focusing on. A year ago, I had the wrong opinion that it doesn't matter because at some point it's all going to be code that the agent is maintaining. But just what you were saying, Rasmus, at least right now, even the foundation, the best models that are getting 90% on coding benches, they are producing slop that will compound over time. And so it's up to us as engineers to really have that taste. And I don't think that's going away anytime soon. I could be wrong, but I've
No,
really
you're not
changed
wrong.
my mind in that direction significantly. And this is why I also see people pulling back from the idea that the dark factory is the top of the mountain. I don't say that anymore. I don't even say dark factory because I think if you actually look in sci-fi what a dark factory is, I don't think anybody wants that, because the dark factory really means the whole factory is also thinking of what to do next and what makes sense. And so I think software factory is probably a better term to use, but I don't even think that's the top of the mountain. I really do believe human on the loop is the pinnacle of what to try to get to. Moving from a
Yeah,
human in the loop to human on the loop, but still maintaining that control.
Yeah.
It's all related.
I've been doing a lot of experimentation with dark factories. I actually agree the software factory might be a better term. And I'm still trying to figure out if it's the peak or not.
I think it's the peak for the individual, right? Like,
Sure, yeah.
well, let me ask you a question. For you,
Yeah.
for dark factory, does dark factory also mean writing the spec, deciding
No.
what to build and feeding it in?
No, dark factory is spec in, shipped code out. So
Exactly.
that's
And
also
that is coming. And that's why I say, like, that's why I'm not like
That's
calling it
already
dark
here, in my
factory as
opinion.
much. What's that? Yeah, it really
That's
is. And
already
I think,
here. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe I should
and there's
call it
nothing
spec
wrong with
or
that.
software factory, yeah.
No,
But I
mean,
don't think
the
that's
only,
the pinnacle. Yeah.
But I think that's kind of what we've been talking on all along. Like as long as your build loop is good, like that's already here. Like you're still sitting at the left and the right of that loop, and you still have to, decide what actually gets merged to some extent. I mean, I think at some point, maybe, as you said, a big percentage of that can probably also be automated.
Definitely automated. It's all to the left.
Yeah.
I think our value is in the left, and which is
Yeah.
deciding what to build and why. But
But the
here's
real problems. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the real problems with like a full dark factory where all of the left side is also automated is like who is going to talk to the customers, who is going to decide
Exactly
what to
right. Or
build
you're
next.
relying on signals or something. I mean,
Yeah, like where
can
do
we
you get
build
the
systems like
signals?
that?
Yeah.
Of course, but
Yeah.
I don't think we want to in every case. And I think, anyways, that's kind of me being a purist of what the term came from, right? From sci-fi
That's
and
fair,
everything.
though. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I agree with you. Like, I just don't think it's the pinnacle. I think, like Rasmus said, we're there now, and I think everybody can build and everybody should experiment with building their own software factory where it can take a spec and get it all the way to production. And what do you need to do to actually guarantee that it has the right gates, that you trust it. Like do this in an actual production enterprise system, not on a hobby project. What things do you want to think about to know that you can sleep at night and not be worried that that spec you
Mhm.
told it to do at 5 o'clock in an afternoon on a Tuesday, because Claude loves to talk Tuesdays. So, when you put that work in there on a Tuesday, are you going to sleep Tuesday night and not be afraid that everything's on fire Wednesday? Figure out what else you got to put in the process to get there. Um,
That's good.
but yeah, it's a
Yeah,
cool
I want to
topic.
touch on one more
It's fun.
thing, yeah, or a couple of things actually that you said here as well. And I come from the opposite side of the spectrum. Like 4 years ago, I was a product manager, right? So uh, I also about taste, like for me as well, like taste has always been about product taste, and
Yeah.
that's also something that has to go. Like it's not only about how code is written or how code is supposed to be looking like. That's obviously as well important, but product taste is also very important. Like what should your product feel like? What should your product look like? And that is things that AI is really bad at the moment.
Mm.
Like it's really bad at building UI that feels good without you
Hmm.
being extremely specific about what you want.
And
So you
or it
still
looks like
need to
everything
have
else.
that product
Hmm.
taste all the way down to code taste as well. So I mean, the main things I have had to learn over the last 4 years is exactly what you described. I've had to learn like systems engineering, architectural design, uh, what does good code look like. I also already have that simplification step that you described in my loop. Like I have this auto refactoring kind of, don't change any functionality, just make it look cleaner,
Yeah.
basically.
In our
I
in our
also have
BMAD
like
build.
its own
Oh,
like coding or sorry, commenting. I have a comment review scope at the end as well that
nice.
will, if the comment is not, if the comment is describing the code, the comment doesn't need to be there. The code should describe the code, essentially.
Right.
So.
It's nefarious what starts slipping in as the models and harness changes. Not to beat this comment dead horse, but I'm so mad over it because it was working well. But this also, who was it? Not maybe Boris or Carpathia or one of them said, like, every time a new model comes out, you really do need to look at throw out your agents MD,
Yeah, that was Boris.
throw out what's driving your skills. You don't have to throw out all the skills, but throw out what's driving them and redo them and see what you need and what new things you need. Like, not everything is getting better at the end of the day. Like that's the learning I took from this Opus 5 fiasco, where now it's putting these slop comments in the code that I know will be detrimental given more time.
Yeah.
So
This I think we can talk about a little bit too, because I mean, Anthropic, obviously they deleted 80% of their system prompt.
yeah,
A little bit later, they released Opus 5, and then they kind of, like, without adding things back into their system prompt, they kind of backtracked a little bit, and they wrote this huge blog post about what do you need to tell Opus to not give you this slop? And they have a bunch of ideas or or instructions of what you should essentially add back into your system prompt to not have Opus give you
yeah.
all of this slop. And for me at least, like my reduction of prompt has worked really well across Sol and Fable. But anytime I use Opus, I'm basically prompting more now than what I did before.
Right.
It's it's debatable, right? It's an interesting thing. I think it's partially the model. I think it is also the system prompt. I like there's definitely something that feels different in the model, and I don't think it's only that they removed a lot of the system prompt. People that have they post that there's GitHub repos that actually post what they claim is the actual system prompt now, and it
Hmm.
does seem like they did remove 80%. And a lot of what remains, at least in the Anthropic system prompt, it seems like most of it is related to workflows. So not only did they drastically reduce it, but they put in all this machinery in there to work with these amazing workflows. And I love Claude's new workflow feature, right? Like it's great. It's magic. It's very cool. Um, but yeah, so what did they take out, right? They just yesterday or the day before um released a new output style that actually works called concise. It's just the name of it is concise. Now, their default one always had the word concise in it, but we all know it was not concise with Opus 5. The new one, I will say, has been working great for the day I've been using it. So you don't have to try to come up with your own. If you haven't tried it yet and you're using Claude, try out the new concise output style. It's wonderful.
And
Um,
does it actually remember it across turns as well?
that's what I need to explore more with today. I just started mostly using it. It might have just been yesterday. we have to see how long it sticks, because I've had lots of problems with output styles where I think that's exactly what you're getting at, is 2 or 3 turns in, it's back to chatty Cathy again, right?
Yeah,
No offense, Cathy, but
exactly that.
it's super chatty.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, the system problem thing is, I will say one thing about BMAD is never built it to be Claude only. Um, that has drawbacks, but it also has benefits. Especially for the enterprise. I know a lot of enterprises, they have a deal with OpenAI or they have a deal with Anthropic. Right. I mean, that's what you're going to do, right? Like, and that's good because you get volume discounts and you get this ecosystem, but you're also stuck when they change things. And so I see this now a lot, is a lot of enterprises are realizing they actually need a backup. They need to be multi-model. It's funny, most companies have been single cloud for the last 20 years and have not have a problem. But a year into the volatility of these models and harnesses, they're realizing it's a crapshoot to actually go in on one or the other, because first of all, they're all working at gross subsidies and keeping the cost down and changing the levers constantly. And when have we ever had a software product that we pay for that randomly changes daily, drastically, like this much, right?
Yeah.
So, God dang, it's an interesting space to be in right now. But yeah, it's just something that we got to keep living with. So BMAD is not meant to be like Claude specific, even though that's the one I use the most. We try to make it work with the Chinese models and with open models and French models, right? Quen and Codex. And I strongly believe in that. I don't want to go all in. And so what that means is, through customization yourself, if you're all in on code, put some hooks in there that work well with BMAD or your own skills, right? So you can still custom and tailor it to work with things. We do use some techniques where it will work with commonalities across all of them. So we push it to use subagents in the right place in our skills, right? So it will use that, but we don't use Claude or Codex specific language.
Right.
That might evolve in the future, but the system prompts didn't affect us too bad, actually, other than the verbosity of the documents, and we're working on that. We'll probably run out of time, so I'm not going to go too much into that. But we try to write our skills to where they're not too volatile, because we make them so they do pretty much work across all the models. So we're not too impacted when one harness or one skill shits the bed, like they kind of did with this Opus rollout.
Right.
Yeah, something I have had a problem with over the last few weeks as well in my framework is that like Codex and Claude, also depending on Claude model, but they behave very differently in terms of when they invoke skills and how good your skill trigger has to be for it to actually use the skill when you want it to use it, and also agents. So with sub-agents, like Codex essentially uses sub-agents for everything, even when you don't want it to. And Claude almost never uses it until you explicitly tell it to.
Well, Claude even just recently put into their system prompt before this last one, and it has been annoying the hell out of me, where even in my skills, it says use subagents to do XYZ, but Claude put into its system prompt only use subagents when the user tells you to use subagents.
Exactly.
And at first, when it told me this, I thought it was hallucinating, but I've seen it multiple times show me this exact wording. And so I had to put into my agents.md file, I wrote all these GD skills. If you like, I probably worded it better, right? But it's like, I am telling you, use subagents, use them whenever you think you should use them. And if a skill tells you, assume that I did that. It actually helped. I haven't seen that message pop up anymore, but that's where I mean, we're building these tools and these things, and we're at the mercy of these changing whims. That it's a challenge to keep up with, just in all honesty, right? So that's an interesting thing. The difference between Codex and Claude is they are very opinionated and do have different philosophies. If you use both, you really do see they have different takes on things. Claude, I can get it to take on different personas and role play, which I enjoy. I know some people don't like that. Whereas Codex is like, your skill named, so and so is doing this, but it doesn't want to take on the persona. So there's things like that that's good though, right? Maybe you want more one style versus the other style. So it's It's an
Yeah.
interesting
I
challenge
mean,
to overcome.
I have found it extremely annoying and difficult because I have had to address this at multiple levels, like with Claude as well, especially because I have skills that I always wanted to use my PR skill, for example. Every time I
Yeah.
place a PR, I wanted to use this skill. So I had to put it at multiple levels. I had to append the system prompt. I had to put it in my Claude.md, both in the project and in my global Claude.md and on my skill
Wow.
trigger, and it still doesn't do it every time.
One thing, I've never really relied on a lot of the skills auto firing, although I haven't had as much
Yeah,
trouble, but I really treat them more like commands
Yeah.
of when I want to run the skill, to the point that
yeah,
some of our skills, we even change the description so they will almost never auto fire,
Hmm.
because that's the way they're meant to be used. So in BMAD, we do have these personas, and you can talk to the persona. And when I tell like the analyst that I want to do brainstorming internally, it will just directly say invoke skill name, and that works
yeah.
almost 100% of the time. But if I want to work on a PRD, I'll just do slash PRD, or if I want to do whatever, I find that I'm used to that, but I love
Yeah.
voice input, and so that's where it starts to become problematic. But generally, I found it to be reliable if I know the skill name or pretty much, and I say like, hey, I want to
Yeah.
create this or work on that. It's, mostly going to get it, but it's annoying if
So
it doesn't.
yeah, I mean, in normal usage, if I sit with one session and I work my way through something, then it's not a problem. Why it's a problem for me is because like my skills are built in two layers. So I have like my primitive skills, and then I have my composition skills. So a primitive skill
Okay.
is my build and create PRD, create spec, build, implement, validate, whatever their
Yeah.
names are. And then I have composition skills that will, invoke those skills in an order, essentially an orchestrator type skill.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And it's when I run the orchestrator, that's when, or when I run the composition skill, that's when I have this problem, because that's when I look away. Like that's when I just wanted to follow the instruction that I have given it
Right.
until the PR is ready, cycled through X amount of review loops and ready for me to take a look at. So that's in
Yeah.
that cycle, that's when I have these problems. When I sit with the agent, then don't have this problem, because I of course also know the names of my skills, and I will just, when I need
Hmm.
it, I will invoke it. But if I run this like on autonomous mode, if you will, then I
Hmm.
have this problem all the time.
We should, man, this could be a whole other topic. I would love to talk to you guys just about this topic, but I know
Yes.
we're going to run out in like 9 minutes.
Right. Yeah.
But so I'm not going to even comment on that because I want to.
Uh,
But
yeah. Well, we're gonna have to have another workshop. Definitely.
yeah.
There's so many more things we can talk
Uh,
about. I think it'd be good just to end here with another question from the chat. So we'll do that, and then we'll do a bit of wrap up as well. But Eric had a good question. This is going back to, I think, like our previous conversation right before we were talking about Opus and issues with coding agents recently. But he asked, how do you mentor senior engineers that are not system thinkers into adapting frameworks like BMAT or RPIV? So basically, for the people that do get very in the weeds, or like they're super proud of like understanding syntax, and they're like, oh, I can do
Yeah.
every command in Linux, and I know how to do all the really complicated grep commands that your coding agent asks, and you're like, oh, sure, go ahead and do it. Like those people that are so obsessed with that, how do you get them out of that rut, or just help them change their mindset?
I'm going to repeat what I said at the beginning because I promise you, I've seen this have transformative effects. So when I talk to companies and even in my own company, um, I say, give me your detractors up front. And it's usually senior engineers or people
Yeah.
that again hang their value on, their
Hmm.
ability to know the node internals or, like
Yeah.
just this obscure, Python or Java or whatever. And just force everybody to go through this process of the sprint pressure is off for the next 2 weeks. Everybody's going to only have one task for the next 2 weeks. It would normally be a story that probably took you 3 to 4 days in the past, but for the next 2 weeks, that's all you're going to do. And you're going to do
Hmm.
what I described at the beginning is just don't give them a framework. Don't give them everything and have them go through that. When I did this with a team, a few more details on it. We did stand-ups every morning, which is a 15-minute meeting at the start of the day when everybody's online. But instead of giving a status update every day, which is what most stand-ups have become, but I digress.
Hmm.
Instead, everybody would share techniques and stuff that they learned. And by the third or
Nice.
fourth day of doing this, it just created such a level of excitement of people discovering things on their own. By the end of the week or two, most people basically reinvented what Cole and I preach on their own. People will
Yeah.
come to these decisions. And when you let them do this, this is the whole idea of an article I wrote before that Rasmus actually reminded me I wrote that I forgot I wrote called, it's a permission problem. It's not an agent problem, right? A lot of engineers, they just don't have the time to like really try this over and over again and build up the muscle memory. They're not joining Cole's community or watching our YouTube videos or in our Discord communities and like absorbing this, right? We here, all of us on this call are in a bubble where we care about this stuff and we love about this stuff. But a lot of people, they have a job, they're working 9 to 5. They
Hmm.
have sprint commitments. They got to get stuff done. So give them the opportunity to do this, but sometimes you got to be a little bit firm and say, like, this is all you're going to do for the next 2 weeks. You have to try this. And by the end of the 2 weeks, you have to show me that you can have the agent build and complete the story on its own, validated. And then
Yep.
if people do that and they get there quicker, have them do it over and make it more efficient and figure out other things. It leads to an explosion of so much other creativity. People will start thinking about, well, damn, do I got to do all this error triage myself every morning and look through the logs, or can we create agents to do that? Or, oh, we do this process. Like the transformation is not just beyond their ability to use the agent. It will unleash a creativity where people will start creating their own skills. People will start thinking about reinventing tools for their own needs and
Hmm.
using Slack in interesting ways to connect to different things. It's so transformative. I love it. So
Yeah. That's
hopefully that
awesome.
helps answer your question. I mean, some people, I will say that there are detractors of AI, and like AI has its problems, right? It's not the magic that, I probably even thought it was a year ago. The veneer is off. There are problems. There's things that we talked about even here today that have to be solved. And some people, they want their craft to be software engineers. I don't fault them for that. That's like somebody that wants to be a woodworker, right? And they love, they could use a CNC machine or whatever, but they want to use those hand tools. There's nothing wrong with being that craftsman if that's what you love. And there might even still be needs for that. Or don't let your job, you know, be the thing that you love, right? Like
Sure.
because a job will suck the love out of everything. So if you want to be a code crafter and not use AI, do it, but realize the job has moved on and you kind of got to, I mean, it's going to come to a point where it's going to be hard to avoid it, I believe. So hopefully that
Yeah.
helps. I mean, everybody's different,
That's
but
good.
hopefully that kind of helps answer that question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
That's
think
really
as well,
good.
like if you are a leader in the company too, and listening to this as well, like you're going to get so much more value about allowing those 2 weeks as well. Because imagine when those 2 weeks are over, everything that you didn't ship those 2 weeks are going to be able to be shipped so much faster.
Yeah.
That's
So you're
right.
going to catch up
That's
and
right.
speed ahead
Yeah, the
in a
return on
few weeks
investment
after
is
that. Yeah,
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 the return on
the return
investment
on
is very
investment.
good. Yeah, and yeah, everything that Brian is saying here, like I've seen the same with the companies I work with, where people just get addicted to it, right? Like the initial training is kind of the gateway drug. Company forces developers to work with these tools, and then they love it so fast. And they're building skills, they're sharing with each other, and they're building up that common like repo or artifact or repository, whatever of their skills and subagents, things like that. And so I think this is like a really good stopping point here. That was like Brian's 5 minute masterclass on how you get your
There
team
you,
or an organization
there
to
you go.
adopt coding
Yeah.
agents. Because
Five,
yeah,
5 minutes, millions of dollars of change in 5 minutes. There
that's
you
right.
go.
Yeah, super good. So yeah, we're pretty much at time here. But yeah, no, there's probably a couple of questions we didn't get to as well. So definitely, if there are a couple, feel free to just post them in the community. I'll even follow up with Brian if I need to. But yeah, sounds like we're going to need to have even a third session at some
Yeah,
point.
we'll
There's
do
just so
this.
many, so many good things to cover here. So
Well, Cole and Rasmus, I hope you guys will come on my podcast one day and we can
yes,
continue the conversation. And I would love to learn
let's
more
do
about
it.
what you guys are doing and all the great stuff in
Would love
Dynamis.
to.
And these topics are so much fun to discuss. So thank you so much,
Yeah.
guys. This was so awesome.
Yeah, you as
Thank
well.
you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Rasmus, and thank you everyone for your questions as well. Yeah, this is fantastic. I'm learning just as much as all of you too as we go through this. So yeah, and
Very
then
good.
yeah, recording will be posted a little bit later than usual because there's some other settings I tweaked that'll make the processing time longer. So if you guys weren't here for the whole thing, you should have to wait a little bit longer for that. But anyway, yeah, this was fantastic. So thank you again, everyone. Hope you guys have a fantastic weekend, and I will see you all in the community. See you guys.
See
Bye,
ya.
everybody. Thank you.